Back for the last part of the video here with Nurse Franny. We're going to talk about regulation of blood pressure and flow. So there are three ways um, of controlling vasomotion. All right, vasomotion. Now remember that vasomotion is just you know vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So we have local, neural, and hormonal control, but we don't actually have to. For now, don't worry about this one. Don't worry about local yet. Don't worry about that one just yet. Now, we do have to know, though, neural control. Neural control is very important. So that one, for neural, we have baroreflexes, chemoreflexes, and medullary ischemic reflex. Okay? So let me just define neural control. Vessels under remote control by the central and autonomic nervous system. So, shit. I don't want to write this whole thing, but give me 1 second. Yeah, let's just say vessels under remote control by the central and autonomic nervous systems. And within neural control, we have the autonomic reflexes. Okay. We actually have baroreflexes, chemoreflexes, and medullary ischemic reflex. Okay, so the baroreflex is an automatic negative feedback response to changes in blood pressure. Okay, so let's just say increases in BP detected by carotid sinuses, signals sent to brainstem by way of glossopharyngeal nerve. All right, so we're going to put here that nerve number 9. Okay, let's just say this influences negative feedback response to changes in BP. Now the chemoreflex let's see. Oh, and we should know that the medulla oblongata maintains the blood flow to the brainstem. So it's very important for the third one, for the medullary ischemic reflex. We're going to see how the medulla oblongata, when it senses that it has, when it detects that's blood flow, it'll cut blood supply to any other part of the body to assure that there's blood supply to the medulla oblongata. Because if the brainstem goes down, you go down. That's one thing that you have to absolutely memorize. And there's another, before we go into chemoreflex, we should know orthostatic hypertension. Okay. So, give me 1 second. This should be 2 words. Is it hypertension or hypotension? Oh yeah, low blood pressure that occurs upon standing up. Decrease in blood pressure related to position. Blah, 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 blah. That's good. So orthostatic hypotension is low blood pressure that occurs upon standing up. Orthostatic hypertension would be your blood pressure increasing when you stand up, but you don't feel it. You don't feel that at all. Now let's talk about the chemoreflex. The chemoreflex, all right, it's an automatic response to changes in the blood chemistry. But what we talked about today was especially in pH and concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So these are peripheral chemoreceptors. This is what you want to know. Chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors. Now, these actually sense Let's see. They sense a change in pH and oxygen and put a comma here. pH, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Okay, so that's that. And we should know that these are located in the aortic arch. I'll put that in caps. They are located in the aortic arch. Okay. So the medullary ischemic reflex. So it's automatic response to a drop in perfusion of the brain. The book says automatic response to drop. Yep, it's an automatic response to a drop in perfusion in the brain. Medulla oblongata monitors its own blood supply. Very important. Medulla oblongata, exactly. Monitors its blood supply and activates corrective reflexes when it senses insufficient perfusion. Tries to restore blood flow to brainstem by increasing BP. Absolutely magnificent. You have to memorize that. Now, we should know hormonal control. With hormonal control, we're talking about hormones that influence blood pressure. So, hormones that influence BP, blood pressure. There's a couple. So, A&P, or atrial natriuretic peptide, it actually is release with, okay, so this is actually pretty confusing. So I'm going to say right atrium releases A&P for body to release, for kidneys to release more sodium. God damn it. More sodium for then body to then release more water. Okay, that's A&P. So your atrium tells your kidneys to release more sodium, and then water follows sodium. So then you start peeing more. However, you have aldosterone. Okay, this is actually pretty important. Aldosterone is antagonistic to A&P. I'm going to put aldosterone, and I'm going to put here an ADH. And ADH is anti-diuretic hormone. They're antagonistic to A&P. I'm going to put both raise BP by retaining water. Easy. So that's aldosterone. Epinephrine, very important. Epinephrine. Jesus. Or adrenaline. Adrenal medulla, yes. So epinephrine, let's see. Give me 1 second. It affects, yes, so it affects most blood vessels. If it binds to an alpha adrenergic receptors is vasoconstriction, but skeletal and cardiac muscle blood vessels bind to beta adrenergic receptors for vasodilation. Affects most blood vessels with vasomotion. Let's just keep it at that. And I'm going to put here adrenaline. Okay. Now, 2 purposes of vasomotion. I'm going to put here 2 purposes of vasomotion. Now, the one is general method of raising or lowering BP throughout the whole body. And number two, method of rerouting blood from one region to another for perfusion of individual organs. Okay, so that's great. That is that. And let's see, we went through the blood flow response to needs. So we went over. Oh, we didn't get this far, actually. Let's go up. Okay, so right here. This is the last thing we talked about. So the last thing we talked about was blood flow in response to needs. So here, when we are at rest, total cardiac output is 5 liters per minute. We are looking at renal at 1100 milliliters per minute, 22%, digestive system at 1350, cerebral at 700, skin, coronary, other, and muscular. But then when you're not at rest, when it's moderate exercise, you're looking at your muscles with 12.5, digestive with 600, so a lot less. Look at digestive here with 1350, but then when you are actually exercising, it's 600 milliliters per minute. Renal, 1100, but when you're exercising, 600. Cerebral, trick question, 14%, 700 when you're at rest. 4.3%, but it's 750 when you're working out. Okay, you use more blood. You have more blood in your head when you're working out. You have to understand that even though overall in this pie chart, 750 milliliters per minute for the cerebral is 4.3%, a lot less than the 700 milliliters per minute at 14%. Okay, when it comes to this pie chart, you have to understand that when you are resting, you're using less blood in your brain. When you're working out, you're using a lot more. Okay, so when you're working out, when you're running, when you're doing anything excessive, your muscles use a lot of blood. Your brain uses a lot of blood, a little bit more than when it's resting. But then your digestive system and your urinary system use almost half. They actually use almost half of what they would use if they were at rest. So that's one concept that you have to understand. And with that, I think we're done for today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about capillary exchange. That is slide 12-75, and we're going to finish chapter 20. But for now, thank you very much. We went over basic vessel anatomy. So we're going to go over these one more time. We went over tunic externa, media interna. We know our arteries. We know the veins. We know conducting arteries, distributing arteries, arterioles, venules, veins, capillary beds, and aneurysm, circle of Willis, carotid sinus, body, the three capillary types, continuous, fenestrated, and discontinuous, the venous valves. What happens when the venous valves do not work? You get varicose veins. We have the venous sinus. We already know the dural venous sinus. We know the coronary sinus. We know hemorrhoids, portal system, anastomosis, arteriovenous anastomosis, venous anastomosis, blood pressure. Now, when we delved into blood pressure, we're talking about systolic and diastolic and pulse. Hypertension, still on blood pressure. What is our blood pressure determined by? Cardiac output, volume, and the actual resistance. What does the resistance hinge upon, right? So what does it depend upon, right? So blood viscosity, vessel length, and vessel radius. Some more facts in BP. It's non-pulsile. You cannot take a pulse on a vein. Okay, you just can't do it. Remember the example that we had about the horror movie when the girl got slashed in the neck and the blood squirted out with a lot of pressure. Then the professor said, well, that girl got slashed in the neck and the blood squirted out because you actually hit an artery. There's a lot of blood pressure there. There's 120/80, as opposed to the blood just gushing down on the neck. If she were slashed hitting a vein, blood pressure is actually 10 or 25/10, where when you're talking about the pulmonary circuit. But right now we're just talking about the blood pressure in general. So 25/10 or 10 when it comes to the actual pulse. Okay, very low. We talked about 3 ways of controlling vasomotion: local, neural, and hormonal. We're not worrying about local just yet. We're worrying about neural and hormonal. If it's neural, we're talking about the autonomic reflexes. We're talking about the baro reflex. We're talking about the chemo reflex and the medullary ischemic reflex. So for baro reflex of pressure, right? It's the glossopharyngeal nerve or nerve 9. It influences the negative feedback response to the changes in BP. So remember, your glossopharyngeal nerve is going to help with vasodilation or vasoconstriction. Your chemoreflex, you have your peripheral chemoreceptors. Okay, they're located in the aortic arch. They're going to help with detecting blood pressure, the same way that your circumventricular organs detect blood pressure. Uh, pH levels in oxygen and carbon dioxide. The medullary ischemic reflex, super important. It's your medulla oblongata, noticing that it needs more blood or needs more oxygen in the blood. Hormonal control, A&P, aldosterone, ADH, epinephrine, and the two purposes of vasomotion. And then lastly, we went over on that picture on the actual blood flow in response to certain needs. If you're running, if you're doing exercise, your blood will go to certain organs as opposed to others. And we saw that with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system when it comes to fight or flight, or when it comes to rest and digest. And that's the end for this video. I hope that actually helps. Stay tuned for tomorrow. We're actually going to end the chapter, and then we're going to go through chapter 21 for tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we're going to have a quiz on Thursday about 20 and 21. Have a good night, man.